Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present a first of its kind on our platform. We are thrilled to present the first ever panel. And what a panel of esteemed rock star music executives we have for you today. I promise you will leave today thinking, wow, who knew? And you'll also leave smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. And in this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And also ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the session. And also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thank you to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. As mentioned a moment ago, I am presenting a different program today because the subject matter and the speakers involved warrant that. For me personally, the seeds of today's program were sown by two distinct events. But these two events were just two in what could be easily viewed as thousands of similar events over many decades. The two events I am referring to are first, Tomatogate, and second, the George Floyd incident. First, Tomatogate refers to a 2015 report written by a prominent radio consultant who said that country music radio stations, for them to succeed, they should program their playlists like a salad where the male artists are the lettuce and the female artists are the tomatoes. This shocking statement shook up a lot of people, including many of Nashville's Music Row leaders, including Beverly Keel, who along with Leslie Fram and Tracy Gershon helped organize the Change the Conversation movement. Then in 2020, the George Floyd incident hit, and the entire music industry responded with Blackout Tuesday. And as a result of that, the Nashville Music Equality Project was launched. I am not going to go any deeper into this history, lest I steal any thunder from our guests today. With that as a backdrop, let's get this thing started. In today's host seat, we welcome my friend and one of my music industry heroes, Shannon Sanders. I've been chasing Shannon to appear as a guest on this program for quite some time, and I am thrilled that he decided to bring some of his fellow Nashville Music Equality leaders and board members with him. On joining Shannon as today's featured guests are Gina Miller, Beverly Keel, Courtney Toney, and Alondis Brazel. It is an honor to welcome these rock stars to our platform, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. Shannon, take it away.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome, friends and family, to a transformative conversation on dismantling bias in the music industry. As your moderator, I invite you to open your hearts, your minds, and together, let us challenge the foundations of prejudice and inequality. With empathy and a thirst for growth, we can reshape our industry into a haven of inclusivity and celebrate the diverse voices that enrich our world. With that, we'll get started. Tom will post the bios of this esteemed panel in the chat. So if you want to know more about our panelists, look in the chat and you can learn more about our panelists. So with that, we want to get our conversation started today. I want to start with a particular graphic. Courtney, do you mind showing the graphic?
Despite what you might be thinking.
Right. Is it
Blue
post-
circles are
I don't-
not equal.
I don't know if
Because
we,
in fact,
I don't know if we can see it.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you-
I'm
Hang on, Shannon. I'm trying to give her control.
Okay.
You
Okay.
got there sooner than I did. Sorry.
Okay, it's all right. Good to see some familiar faces here.
All right, Courtney, you have the wheel.
All
all
right.
right. Thank you.
All right, I want to play you some audio right quick with that.
Do you need me to play the audio too? I've got it.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and play the audio.
that to believe in something that goes against your natural instincts. Just imagine as a child, you're taught that the blue circle is larger than the red.
All right, everybody, take a listen.
If you say it enough times, you convince yourself that's the truth. If you're told the lie enough times, it becomes part of your
Hey,
reality.
Courtney, take that back to the
If
top
enough
if you
people
would.
are taught that lie, that the blue circle is larger than the red, well,
Yeah.
now it becomes part of the culture.
Hey, Courtney.
Culture
Yeah,
then
yeah.
passes that misinformation along to the next generation. Well, now
Hey, Courtney, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, take that back to the top one more time. Like, let's start that at the top.
thinking, these two circles are not equal. I repeat, these two circles are not equal. One is in fact larger than the other. What I need you to do is determine which one that is. So please raise your hand if you believe the blue circle is larger than the red. All right. Please raise your hand if you believe the red circle is larger than the blue. All right, very good. Now, before I said anything about these two circles, what was your first instinct? Equal, right? Because they look equal. And the reason why they look equal is because, in fact, they are equal. These two circles are identical. Yet I got just about every one of you to raise your hand and say that they're not. So what do we learn? That you can be manipulated like that to believe in something that goes against your natural instincts. Just imagine as a child, you're taught that the blue circle is larger than the red. If you say it enough times, you convince yourself that's the truth. If you're told the lie enough times, it becomes part of your reality. And if enough people are taught that lie, that the blue circle is larger than the red, well, now it becomes part of the culture. And if that culture then passes that misinformation along to the next generation, well, now, despite what you might be thinking,
All right.
these two.
All right. Thank you, Courtney. So the last thing that he said is that it becomes tradition. And so that's a lot of what we wrestle with. And so this is why Nashville Music Equality was formed, for the purpose of dismantling systematic racism. And we're talking about the kind of racism that doesn't always even recognize itself as racism. So how we came together, like Tom said, we came together as a response to the murder of George Floyd, Blackout Tuesday. Courtney, Tony got us together for a panel. It was a very powerful conversation, and I'll let Courtney take you into that. But this is how and why we came together. So, Courtney, would you like to tell them how and why we came together?
Yeah, I mean, you and Tom pretty much said it. I mean, for me, it was seeing what was happening on the news, of course, with George Floyd's passing. But then I also was seeing things on social media with different cities like LA and New York in the music industry that were doing things, and I didn't see anything happening in Nashville. And I thought, wow, this is a really missed opportunity that really could be very educational. And so I think it was Thursday or Friday night, and I just randomly sent Beverly a text message along with Cameo Carlson, who's on our board, and asked them, did they hear of anything? And both of them have replied back to me and said no. And they were like, well, you know, maybe we can think of something. And then I just personally just told them, I was like, actually, I have an idea. I didn't know what it would be. And then we got onto Beverly, I think it was, we got onto a Zoom call and started working through some ideas. And then within 72 hours, you know, was able to contact you and Gina and a few others, including Mickey Guyton, to see if you guys would be interested. I mean, I didn't know, I thought maybe 30 people would join. And then once we got onto on that Tuesday, we had over 1,000 people in our music community. and beyond. People from the Washington Post were on it, people from London, England, a lot of heads of companies and artists as well were on it. So again, I'm amazed that we're still here 3 years later, and amazed that honestly you guys even thought it was a good idea.
Well, you know, it's been an incredible journey, and the thing that we didn't anticipate from that original panel was how many times since then we would be called upon to have those conversations. And even today, you know, today is one of those conversations. And so Beverly, being one of the members of that original panel, you know, one of the things that made this group of people stick is really just discovery. Like, really more than anything, it became the Breakfast Club. You know, we became a think tank for each other. Beverly, you know, one of the things that's been so amazing, so powerful about having Beverly as part of this crew is that, you know, Beverly is proud, Beverly is bold, but Beverly is inquisitive, and Beverly doesn't mind doing the work, and Beverly shows up, you know. And so Beverly has expressed over time her meaningful ahas. Beverly, if you will, you know, share with us some of your meaningful ahas as you know, just during your time here with us and with Nashville Music Equality.
Well, there are ahas about the industry and ahas about my friend's life. So my aha about the industry was, you know, you believe what you see. And so I thought that Black people weren't interested in making country music because we didn't see them anywhere. And so I learned that's not the truth. Hello?
Along about 150-mile stretch on the border, which is, I think, a deliberate policy of the Ukrainians.
Can you all hear that?
Yes, please mute whoever's talking. Shannon, it's on one of your connections.
Okay, so I'll start over. So you know, you believe what you see. So I thought people weren't interested in making country music because we never saw that. And I learned quickly that that wasn't the case. It's that the gatekeeper said, you know, no, we can't sell you to the audience, or you can't even get in to see the gatekeeper. And then on a personal level, and I share with Gina and Shannon and others that, you know, I have them on such a pedestal because they are smarter than I am. They're more creative than I am. They're better dressers than I am. I mean, they're amazing people. And they shared with me on that first call what their life experiences have been. You know, when Shannon said he doesn't jog in his neighborhood, that he has to check his energy before he goes into every room, I just was like, wow. Gina shares her stories, and you know, it's one of those where, I mean, I knew racism existed. I knew that police brutality existed. But you know, I wouldn't hear people say racist things about me, so I didn't know how bad it was in 2020 when we started this. So and now my life is a continuous pattern of aha moments that I learned, things that I don't have to think about because I'm white. And if you don't have to think about them, then you don't know it. So I keep saying this is just about listening and learning for white.
That's powerful, Beverly. That's so powerful. You know, and as it relates to the industry, you know, and just where we are, you know, a lot of what we are, again, you know, a lot of our conversations are geared at the music industry, especially here in Nashville. And, you know, we have conversations all the time about just where we are, you know, and although we've come a long way, we still have a long way to go. You know, we'll, you know, take a step, but then you realize, man, we're taking two back, you know, and that being the case, and, you know, that is never more prevalent in, you know, these companies and in these corporations. You know, we hear it said all the time, you know, that as far as hiring practices go, you know, there just isn't enough representation across the board. You know, Gina, let's talk about that. You know, we've spoken before about courage and responsibility, you know, and what that means as far and people taking chances on people. And, you know, let's talk about the deserving, you know, versus people just hiring along or within the parameters of their bias. And that's really the meat of our conversation today is, you know, what makes something systemic is, you know, even if it is something like hiring, and in, you know, in terms of elevating people within these corporations, people do this within their comfort zones and within their biases. Gina, talk to us, if you will, about courage and responsibility.
Well, hey y'all. I think to kind of put some framework around how you teed this up, the courage part comes because I personally believe, this is my personal viewpoint, is that it takes courage for every last one of us to do this work, which probably means that's all of you that are here present today that have a great amount of courage to even show up with your names popping up and being able to drop your LinkedIn profiles. That's probably who you are. You identify as a person already, I'm sure, that's full of courage, because this isn't pretty work. It's not glamorous work, and it's very difficult work, and it's uncomfortable for people to do this work. So the courage part comes in coupled with the fact that I also believe in my heart of hearts that leadership is not just a top-down word. It's not only entitled to people who are at the top down in positions. Leadership is everyone at every level who has a responsibility that they can inspire somebody to do something, whatever, across the board. That could be something positive or negative, but that's absolutely a belief that I live to my core, is that every single person in every organization at every level has an opportunity, if they have courage, to be a leader. And so, coupled around where we're going in this conversation, I think what's key to point out, even with Beverly kind of even leaning into what we believe is what we see. And a lot of times we don't see people who've been traditionally, whether it's artists and creatives in country music, or whether it's executives who haven't had the experiences that would warrant them the mobility that we see others, you know, a lot of times that's others who are unqualified for jobs that are given opportunities. So I think there are a few words that come to mind, is that where disparity still lies a lot of times in the world of Black executives and probably also Black creatives, that would be access. A lot of times that's the bigger word that separates us from a lot of things, that we don't have the ability to even know. Like, if there's a game being played, if there's a playbook, half of the battle is knowing that there's a game being played and what's in the playbook. And if you don't have access to that, or have a mentor or an advocate or someone who's willing to walk you through what the processes are, how to get to the people who are the gatekeepers, how to meet people, you know, how to position yourself really to be in rooms where you can connect with people who can avail opportunities to you. So one of the things that I've been finding myself saying over and over is that what we have to challenge everyone to see across the board is not just what your experiences on paper prove that you've done, but what does the possibility look like based on an opportunity that you could present to someone. Everyone would not be qualified on paper. It just doesn't happen that way. It's the same way we're looking at artists and looking at numbers only. At some point, gut has to be a big percentage of why you want to be in a relationship or partnership with whatever part you play in this industry. But as it relates to executives, especially Black executives who are looking to have opportunities to level up, if you will, I think many of them won't always have a resume that says that they are qualifiable in the terms of what HR might be looking for. But what people do need is someone who can say, you know what, this person has a lot of possibility, and I'm willing to give them an opportunity that provides them access, resource, education, mentorship, like all the things that someone else is being availed to that doesn't look like me. And that's what I really want to, that's one point that I absolutely want to leave with this group here and those who will watch hopefully on the replay, is that that's what we need to continue this conversation. I mean, there's some, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the Annenberg report, I can tell you that it's a powerful analyzation of what's been going on in the music industry. And I'll just give you just a super brief idea of what Annenberg report says. Now, they did this report consistently. They've done it every year, and every year they have really gone through and looked at different parts of the industry. So this year, I think they focused on production, like film and movies. They've done different ones. So go back and look at it. But let me just give you this brief stat, then I'll toss it back to somebody else. They did a survey of 4,000 executives, 119 music groups, record labels, publishers, live promoters, radio companies, streaming services, and they list them all. They list them all the big names, majors, independent companies, blah, 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 blah. It was found that top executives at 70 leading music companies, 86% were men and 86% were white. In 70 of those companies, there were only 3 Black top executives and only 2 women of color. That includes Live Nation, AEG, Sony Music, Universal, Warner, Spotify, iHeart, Cummins. This is not, my conversation is not to blow the whistle on anybody. It's just to say this is still happening. And
Go on and blow it, Gina. Go on and blow it.
And as of 2023, I can tell you that that number is smaller because we lost Ethiopia at the top as a CEO. Like literally, I can name all the Black female CEOs of music companies on one hand, and that's minus a thumb. And so, you know, I think that we still have, we look around and there every day, we're seeing that white men are still largely being promoted who are not qualified to do jobs. And that's not happening. Like that's not happening it's no equal access yet. And I think that that's still the bigger part, that we got to get to a place where we want to see a truly equitable ecosystem, that we would consider how many new voices that we're willing to bring to the table.
And so to that point, you know, let's think about that. Let's unpack that for a minute. And then I want to talk to Landis, but unpack that for a minute and let's think about that, because why would that be? And again, biases. You know, is it that people are hiring based on their biases? You know, think about what that graphic and that audio said in the beginning, right? You know, based on, if somebody told you, if you believe that one circle was smaller than the other, if it's that easy to just tell you that it's smaller and you believe it, then it's easy to tell you that Black people are not as smart or this person is less qualified. It's easy for you to believe that because you've been told that your whole life. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And so what that thing said is that over time, that belief becomes tradition. It becomes culture, and then it becomes tradition. And then tradition, another word for that would be heritage. And that's something we hear a lot. So this heritage, these traditions, another word for that is values. These become your value systems, and you don't leave your values at home when you come to work. So if you do work in an HR department, your biases are based on your values. Anybody want to talk about that?
Well, I want to jump in and just say that, you know, with this work, we're not, you know, anti-white. We don't want white people to feel guilty for being white, just like Change the Conversation is not anti-man. We just want to give everybody equal access to a seat at the table. We want everybody to have access to the opportunities. We want to remove the biases, the racism, sexism, homophobia that prevents people from getting those opportunities. So it's not about taking away from one group and just giving to the other arbitrarily. It's about creating a welcoming atmosphere and environment where everybody feels like they belong. And I want to give a shout out to the Recording Academy's Nashville chapter, because I have seen more change there in the last 5 years than anywhere else in the Nashville music industry. I know Shannon was the first Black president of the Nashville chapter. Ruby Amonfu was the first female Black president, and I think the third female president, if I'm not mistaken. And last night was the Grammy block party. And The lineup was diverse, the audience was diverse, and it wasn't just, a quota. I felt like everybody felt like they belonged there, and it was better because of it. So I do want to give a shout out to the Recording Academy, who has made tremendous strides and been very successful.
So Beverly, so on that note, and I'll throw this out to the room, does that mean, based on what you just said, diversity is a strategy? It doesn't just happen, right? It's not a luck thing. Like you really, and I can tell you from the Recording Academy perspective, how much work it's taken from different groups of leadership in that room over time. It's taken a while. You know, one thing Obama said when he was in office, somebody asked him about the economy, and I think they wanted to turn quickly. He said, look, this thing is not a speedboat. You know, it's an ocean liner. It turns over time, and you feel it over time, but you have to be patient and be in it for the long haul. But would you guys agree that this conversation of diversity, this work, is strategy?
Well, Shannon, I want to turn the tables on you for a second, because what you always say is people are leaving money on the table. So there are lots of country music fans who aren't white. If you look at the changing demographics of America and of the world, talk about that a little bit. So it is good business strategy.
Well, totally. Like, I mean, look, data is showing that there will be exponentially more money in country music over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. And what I said is that it's not because the existing consumer is planning to spend more money. They're not going to spend more money necessarily than they already are. It's about who's coming. It's about the opportunity. It's about people looking in, and I tell artists this all the time, but I say this now to the industry. I tell artists all the time and creators, don't create mirrors of yourself. Excuse me, portraits of yourself. Create mirrors so that other people can see themselves reflected in what you're doing. And that's the thing that I've personally been challenging the country music industry specifically to do. You know, allow everyone to see themselves reflected in what this experience is. That's where you're leaving money on the table. You got a lot of people out here that see themselves as part of this conversation. Really, you know, Clay says it all the time, and I told him a long time ago, really what country is these days is Southern pop, you know, and so everybody sees themselves reflected in that. You know, pop is just popular. And, you know, there are lots of people that see themselves as part of this Southern lifestyle and experience. And you know, no longer is country considered exclusively a soundtrack of racism. And so that's the thing. And I think that that's what we're feeling in town, is that the dismantling of that, you know, racist, biased framework and machinery that's been in place for so long. And, you know, I dare say, even with the new hire Universal, you know, I'll just go ahead and say it. Like, there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, how the young lady looks, and just the, you know, and just the fact that she comes from Def Jam, and what could she possibly know about country music? Well, to be perfectly honest, you know, where she comes from in terms of marketing, they're ahead of, in a lot of ways, what country's been doing in terms of their practices, in terms of marketing. There's a lot that she can bring from coming from hip hop and understanding streaming as country now moves away, you know, starting to move away from radio being dominant, you know, and that being shared streaming. That pivots us into Atlantis too, you know, just talking about.
Well, Shannon, wait, let me jump in.
Oh yeah, come on, Bev,
You need to elaborate on when you say how she looks. It's because she's a beautiful blonde woman.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And they wouldn't say that if she were a man. They wouldn't comment on a man's looks. But if you're a woman, if you're attractive, they're going to comment on it. If you're not perceived as attractive, they're going to comment on it.
Right.
Whatever your body shape, they're going to comment on it. So that's discrimination as well, and bias.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right.
Look,
like, you're too pretty to be smart.
Look, and I was sitting here mouthing over here to my left going, also where she comes from also is another thing that creates the bias, right? If it were because it's Def Jam, that's also raising which questions it shouldn't raise. And I think that goes also into the executive profile, right? It's like people will look at where you've been, which is why I'm also going right back to your experiences. It cannot be based on your experiences alone, because sometimes they don't even tell the whole story of who you are or what you're passionate about or what your skill set is. Like, if we went on my resume alone, it doesn't tell you only but like 10% is that of who I fully am. It's not exactly all the different things that I'm skilled to do, have passion for, or could learn given the opportunity. So
well, you know, and then Courtney, coming back to you, coming to you actually, But I want to tee this up because we're going to set this up for Landis. What Gina just said about executive profile. We're going to go there, but say what you're going to say, Courtney, too. But I would love to hear from Courtney and Gina about that, about being professionals. You know, this is something that's come up before, about presentation, about as a Black woman, how you have to present, how you have to tone down your personality, how you know, Gina, you know, and being colorful, you know, Courtney and your braids, like, you know, what does it mean to have to try to tone it down, you know, code switch, you know, in certain environments. So, but Courtney, go ahead with your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, you know, to Gina and Beverly's points, again, when it comes to a seat at the table, you know, it's more beneficial for a company to have more people that don't look like you at the table, because those experiences and what we can be able to put into a conversation. And, you know, when you also have people that, you know, look like, say if it's a Black artist that looks, you know, that I can go to their experiences and I understand what they may need in terms of maybe it's hair or makeup or anything like that. But, you know, to be able to have more people at the table that do share different experiences, that's more beneficial to you as overall as a person, professionally and personally, you know. And then, you know, as far as the things that I've gone through, as far, you know, being a Black woman, I mean, we always have to be 2, 3, 5 times better, you know, than our counterparts, because we are, you know, looked at, you know, just more intensely, which is crazy because it's, you know, with Black women, we're the most educated, you know, population in the world. And we, you know, we are the hardest workers. And, you know, I'm not saying that to, you know, disregard anyone else, but it's just ingrained in our fabric. But that is something for me that I always kind of walk that, you know, that fine line of just making sure, like, I have to come in and be authentically who I am, you know, but it is always, you know, just making sure, you know, that you're you know, dressed in a certain way and you speak, and, you know, making sure that you're always, you know, again, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of everyone, because sometimes you can be, you know, looked at, you know, just so much more intensely than other people for no apparent reason. But also it is, you know, when you do ask for a raise or you do ask for certain things, it's kind of like, well, shouldn't you already be happy with what you have? You know, and that's hard because it's like, well, are we not allowed to be able to move up the ladder like everyone else? Gina, I don't know if you want to pick up from that part.
Well, you said about 20 things that I thought,
Right.
boy, let me
Hey,
jump
be
in
happy
here.
with what you have. That was strong, Courtney. Yeah, you said something right there,
Courtney,
Courtney.
that is a real thing. But I also think, you know, the code switching conversation is something that I will touch on just in case everybody's not even clear on what that is. And, you know, African Americans, or I would say probably, you know, folks of other ethnicities perhaps have to do the same thing. And really what code switching is just, you know, a language that you're using that's not your normal self when you're in other, depending on what group, how you show up. And I would just say pretty quickly to that, I tried for a long time, not necessarily code switching because I was embarrassed, because I'm very proud. I'm at home right now in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm very proud to be born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. And for the longest, though, I did think that I needed to try to alter how I sounded. And guess what? It just got exhausting. I couldn't do it. This is who you're going to get wherever I am. I don't care if it's, we can go wherever you want to take me. I'm going to show up like this. And if you want me to come, this is what you get. So you're going to probably get some big hoop earrings and a bright lipstick. And I'm going to just sound like I'm from South Memphis. That's what I am. And so I think for me, it became comfortable enough to say, this is who I am, take it or leave it. But also, I think being okay that some people will leave it. And I think that had to come to I had to reconcile that everyone is not going to take it as much as you're just showing up being, you know, who you are, even doing as great of work as you can do, and even doing the things that have been asked for, like, and that's okay. Like, that is absolutely okay. The people who are for you, y'all, I promise they're on the way to you. I can really promise you that right now. So don't worry about those people. But I do think that there's still a group of people who haven't gotten to a place in their own confidence where they can't show up and be themselves. And that's unfortunate, because every day in corporate America, there's an HR professional encouraging everybody to show up as their whole full self. That is not a reality for a lot of us, to be able to walk into a door with not having to compartmentalize all the things that we bring into the door, our safety being something that's a long time still threatened, but so many different things, not to mention just ending here where Courtney dropped off, is that I don't know how people are expected to show up in an office and give their best selves to something when they know that they aren't getting the best from the company that's wanting them to be their best. I just don't know how that is supposed to work in a formula. If someone could, I don't know how that works. I do think that most employees and the employee-employer relationship is at a very unique impasse right now. I think that more and more, we're going to look back at this time, and I think they're calling it the Great Migration. Is that what's been like? People are leaving companies to start to be entrepreneurial more than ever before, because of a lot of what we're probably talking about. That people are like, you know what, there's a ceiling here for the opportunities. I could start my own company and be a CEO. I think people are looking at pay disparity and say, hey, if I've got to struggle and not be considered, or not being, next in line for whatever the next best opportunity is, I can leave and go somewhere else, or I can start my own thing. And I think there's a lot of that in the workplace right now, workforce, where there's just no people want coming to work. And largely it's because of that. And COVID's really changed the way, on top of George Floyd and all the other things that we've been dealing with, but combining all of that, I think has totally changed the way we're all seeing the world and our place in it. And so, we have to give that some consideration too.
Absolutely. One thing that was powerful, I just peeked in the chat just now, someone saying, the same thing applies creatively.
Thank you, Beverly. Resignation. I said migration.
Okay. Yeah. The great resignation. So same, that the same thing applies creatively, like not only in the boardroom, but in the studio. I always say there's no racism necessarily in the studio, but just to think that, they're saying that just because they're a Black female, 54-year-old Black female, and just because of that, like they're not, someone's not reaching out to them for a particular genre, when they're saying, no, I create this kind of music too. Like, why would you not reach out to me and assume, that's something I've dealt with my whole life as a producer. People assume that because I'm Black, like I can't do rock. Well, I got 3 Grammys, one of them is in rock. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's like to think that you don't know or you don't understand a particular thing or particular genre because of what color you are, or a particular culture, especially as we talk country music specifically. To assume that just because someone is Black, that they're not a student of country music. Alandis, this takes us into you perfectly, and we've talked about this before, just about, for those of you that don't know, Alandis is quite accomplished as a young Black male, and I'd say all those things, and it's not even necessary, but just to give you more context. But as an attorney, and I'm proud of Alandis. I met Alandis before he even graduated from law school. So I'm just very proud of him and all that he's accomplished through his life, in his life and career. But, we've talked about things, Alandis, and what it is to be a Black attorney, especially in Nashville. And we've all heard it. We can all speak to it. But let's hear from Alandis about being, about what that's like, especially when we've heard, and I'll just go on and say it, if you really want to get somewhere in this business, you can't have a Black lawyer can only get you so far. You can only go so. These are the things we hear. You can only go so far with a Black attorney. I'm sure these are things that you've dealt with. What have you encountered in that space, Alandis?
Yeah, just appreciate it. As an extension of what everybody else has been saying, perception has a lot to do with it, right? I think it's all about perception. But even more so, I think it's kind of like a role that we're expected to fill, or a role that we're expected to play, as a you know, as a Black attorney or as a Black executive, right? You're expected to, you know, to bring a certain amount of swagger to the office or something like that, right? Which is, you know, which is ridiculous. You know, I can't count how many times, you know, people have given people handshakes walking out the room, then they try to dap me up. You know, like why? Like I still try to figure that out. Why does that happen? But I mean, you really, you know, I guess as a Black attorney, some of the things that I've seen. First of all, it's hard to find a lot of Black entertainment attorneys, like your straight up entertainment attorneys in Nashville. If you find a Black entertainment attorney, often you're in Atlanta, you know, maybe LA, New York, right? So it's hard to find that. So I think one of the biggest things is one of the hardest things is you know, finding a mentor, finding a place to get in, right? Like finding that door, like getting that foot in the door. And I would say I'm thankful to folks like, you know, I met Shannon, you know, while I was in law school. You know, like I sent him a cold email and said, hey, you know, I used to, you know, work in the industry. I'm in law school. Would love to meet up. And he was like, all right, cool. We met at the Starbucks across the street from Vanderbilt, you know, and from there, you know, he's kind of been plugging me into the industry. Same thing with Gina Miller. You know, I met her when I was working, like right before I started working at a law firm. And, you know, she's been plugging me in, you know, ever since. So I think one of the biggest things that we face is, or one of the biggest obstacles we face is really trying to get our foot in the door, right? And it's because we're expected to not know certain things, or we're expected to not have a certain knowledge level, right? Or we're expected, you know, just to kind of be behind the 8 ball, right? Which is not the case. And really trying to overcome that, I think is tough, right? There's a, you know, when you're training to be a lawyer, there are a lot of things that, you know, you might not know. I'm a first generation lawyer, right? I went to Vanderbilt, and I say I went to Vanderbilt, not as kind of like a, hey, I went to Vanderbilt. It's like, you know, one of the perceptions is always when I tell people I'm a lawyer in Nashville, first thing they say, oh, you went to Belmont, and no shade to Belmont, like Belmont, great law school, right? But I didn't. I went to Vanderbilt, and that's kind of one of those things that a lot of people don't expect. So you're always like, you know, trying to, you always have to beat that hurdle. And then I've actually had an entertainment attorney, like when I was expressing interest in wanting to become an entertainment attorney, I had an entertainment attorney like ask me if I even know what entertainment law was, right? And this is after I worked in the industry for 5 or 6 years, after I had a master's in music business, like, you know, from NYU, right? Like people are asking me like, do I know what certain things are? And like to have that perception, right? To even have the gall to ask me that type of question, right? Like, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have asked, you know, my white male counterpart the same thing, you know? So it really is, you know, just really kind of getting those resources. And then once you get those resources, you know, I think it's about, you know, I think staying power as an attorney kind of comes from like sharing those resources, right? And like making sure that the people that you work with, you know, have the same information you have, are privy to the same information. But, you know, even as a practicing attorney, you know, trying to learn some of the things, you know, like what certain you know, what other people have who you're negotiating for, right? We talked about doing certain things like, you know, being happy with what you have, right? When executives get job offers, right? So if executives get job offers, often you'll hear, you know, Black executives, women executives, Black women executives are often paid less than, you know, what, you know, the white male counterpart might be. But knowing that, you know, how do you help, you know, how do you represent, you know, these people who are getting these executive positions? Are these people who are getting these executive positions even represented by lawyers when they're, you know, negotiating their contracts, right? How do you like reach out to these folks and kind of like help out with that? So it really is just kind of like breaking into it, because you have to find your client base as well, right? And finding your client base is just not going to be, you know, as easy.
Now, Alandis, go a little deeper into that, you know, because I was actually going to ask you about that, you know, which ties into what Courtney said earlier, you know, about folks just being happy to be here. You know, just be happy that you're here. You know, just be happy that we're extending you the opportunity. What you're saying about executives leveraging themselves, you know, a lot of Black executives don't even know that they should be negotiating their contracts, these hiring contracts going into these situations. Can you talk about that? A lot of people don't even know about that, Alandis. So, and which speaks to leaving money on the table.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is leaving the money on the table, right? Because you automatically see a number, and it might be a number that you know, because you're so used to being happy with what you get, you might not expect to see that number, you know, on the contract. So you're like, okay, I'll take it before it gets yanked away from me, you know. So that's one thing. But there are other things that go along with that, you know, as an executive, things like you know, benefits packages, right? You know, are you getting the same benefits package as your counterpart? Things, you know, the music industry is like really entrepreneurial, right? So some of the things we look at are like non-compete, like what happens after this, you know, and are my hands going to be tied? Like once I leave here, like how much will they be tied? Those are often things that are in the contract that people don't think about, you know, that a lot of folks who come to me after the fact, you know, if they're trying to get out, they're like, oh, I can't work here I can't work for 2 or 3 years in this industry or something like that. So then that puts me at a, and then they didn't negotiate like any type of like parachute or any type of severance, right? So now they're kind of in this position where their career is being held up again for like 2 or 3 years. Or, you know, it's entrepreneurial. So you have, you know, executives who also might have like a publishing company or a management company or something like that. And there are a lot of executives who have those companies, right? But you know, sometimes when you come into the fold, you're told, hey, you can't do this, or you can't have this on the side, right? And you have to know how to fight for that, right? And you have to know, hey, you know, John over here is the president, and he also manages 3 artists, and he also has a publishing company. It's not a conflict for him. Why is it a conflict for me? You know, so really like being able to kind of leverage that knowledge, you know, and know kind of what people have. You got to get around that, right? And really the only way to get around it is that representation. But we're not going to get that representation unless we find people to represent us, right? Or unless we know what to look for. So it's like this circle.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you, Alandis. You know, so we got
Can-
about, oh, hey.
Can I just build on what Alandis was just saying? Because he made
Sure.
a really good point, which is something we've been talking about recently. With him just saying, you know, just having someone there that will, you know, that will look at us and will, you know, allow us the opportunities. I think that goes to HR as well, you know, with just you know, allowing the pool of candidates to be more diverse and to not have that bias come in, and just to be able to look at everyone for their skill sets and what they can be able to bring to, you know, to a company. You know, I think that's a big part of it as well. And, you know, once we do get into these positions, to be able to have, you know, our allies to be, you know, be able to, Gina, I know you've spoken a lot about that, just to be able to provide access, you know, whether it be through mentorship or be through, you know, different opportunities to just be able to see us grow and want to see us grow is a big part of it.
Well, you know, and that's perfect, Courtney, because that pivots us into the last part of our conversation. We've got about 12 minutes left. And so I want us to think about, you know, one of the things that's come up is paper versus possibility. You know, that's something we've talked about. Let's talk about what's possible. You know, somebody said in the chat a little bit ago, what are the actionables? What are things that we can take away? You know, so now's the time to get your notebook out. If you haven't, now's the time to take some notes. Let's talk about things that people can do, whether you're creative, whether you work in HR, whether you're an executive, you know, whether you're a student coming out of school. What are the things that you can do if you're a position, you know, especially if you're in a position of power and of influence, what can you do to affect change, micro change, wherever you are? Let's talk about the things that people can do to be the change where they are. Beverly, I want to start with you because Beverly is the dean of, and I may be saying this wrong, Beverly, but the College of Media and Entertainment at MTSU. So that being said, Beverly's a big deal. and Beverly,
you know,
and Beverly, but Beverly's affecting change. And not only Beverly, like I'd also like to shout out the other members of Nashville Music Equality that are doing big things wherever they are. And one of our members is Leslie Fram over at CMT, and she's, you know, done a lot to move the needle where she is. Another one of our members is Cameo Carlson, who is moving the needle. She's created a program called Equal Access to help leverage or level up managers and artists of color, especially in the country space. You know, Amanda Cates, what she is and all that she's done. Yeah, so that's the thing. So that's the thing about this group. Candace Watkins over at Big Loud. You know, our group is Brian Sexton and what he's doing through Metro. You know, Brian Sexton works in Metro and all he's done to connect our creative community and to create an awareness in our city government, you know, and to make them understand who we are as a creative community. But let's talk, that's who we are as a group. That's the rest of our group. But Beverly, talk about being where you are and what you've done and things that people can do. And give us about 2 minutes, if you will. Like I said, we got about at this point about 10 minutes. I want to make sure we hear from everybody about things that people can do, actionables, you know, being where they are, what can they take away, and how can they come off of this Zoom call and immediately affect change?
First, look in the mirror. All right, before you start pointing fingers at other people, make sure that you recognize your biases. We all have biases. All right. So to say that we don't have any, that we're colorblind, that's ridiculous. So
hey, Bev, hey, real quick, talk about privilege. That's something you've talked about.
Right.
Becoming aware
Right.
of privilege.
And I become aware all the time of things that never occurred to me, whether it was growing up and see everybody who looked like me color-wise on the news, right? But I never saw a female anchor, or saw very few female anchors growing up, and you didn't see many people of color in sitcoms and on and on. And even today, I have a good friend who's a high-ranking person at MTSU, and the thing she has to be aware about that I don't have to think about on a daily basis, as Gina said, are exhaustive, from what she wears to how she presents herself, to the car that she drives, to, and listen, I just show up and I'm lucky to be dressed at all. I don't give any thought into it, and just things I don't even know about. So that's why I say it's listening and learning. And back to looking in the mirror, educate yourself, share what you learn with others around you, right? So, and keep in mind right now, especially in Tennessee and Texas and Florida and some other states, DEI is really coming under attack. That is masking racism and sexism and homophobia. So you have to be, go about your way, not to call somebody racist, but just say, hey, did you ever think about the fact that this could be perceived as this? Or, open up their minds. Mentor people who don't look like you. Broaden your hiring pool. Call other people. Shannon and I launched something called Bridges to Nashville, where one of the things I assumed is that many college students of color across the nation don't think about Nashville, and especially country music, as a career destination. So we said, well, let's educate them about Nashville and hope that they will consider it. So we did a 6-month program where they heard not only from creators of color every month, but also labels, publishing companies, booking agents, that sort of thing. And then I said, send me your resume, so that when companies said to me, well, I want to hire somebody of color, I don't know where to find them, I'd say, well, here's a link to 17 resumes. So, and like, shout out to Warner Brothers Nashville. They're really making great strides and efforts. There's all sorts of things. Equal access, the ACM Rising Leaders, which is a year-long educational program. Then they help plan the program for the next year leaders. As Gina says, it's about education and access. So, you don't have to be part of an organization. Just, think about what you post socially, and sometimes you don't use it as a opportunity to attack, but an opportunity to educate.
Thank you, Beverly. And really quickly, I'd like to go to Gina, but before that, I wanted to acknowledge another one of our members, who is Tracy Gershon. I forgot to mention Tracy. Tracy is a publisher. She is an advocate. She is a manager. She is a trustee at the Recording Academy and a very strong advocate in our community. So I wanted to acknowledge Tracy Gershon too, with Nashville Music Equality. Gina, talk to us. What can we do?
Well, really quickly, I'm just going to say the entertainment industry as a whole is so accustomed to a +1. You can't go anywhere in eyes with people anything without someone asking, do you need a +1? Or they're going to grant you a +1. So I would just like to say, consider who you're bringing to the party, who are you bringing to the room, who's going to sit in the chair next to you, and make sure that that person, try your best to ensure that that person is not from your same old circle. And that means that you got to see people. You got to go looking for some folks. It's too easy, we time out for lazy activism. I don't even think the word performative has even come up on this call, but it's too easy to settle into lazy activism. It's too easy now to find folk that you need to have in your organizations. LinkedIn, as Tom is putting all of these wonderful links here, people hit me up all the time on LinkedIn. I don't know who these people are. They're finding people. Hashtags are still a thing, y'all. It's just too easy now. So 5 years ago, maybe 6 years, where are the people? I don't know how to find the people. Okay, maybe that was a thing. But right now, there's too many resources. There's too many other organizations who are compiled resources for you to have vendors from all across every sector of music in this entertainment industry. We're not the only ones. Color Change, I could name you so many different organizations who probably have now directories and information out here on how you can find people who are underrepresented that represent almost anything you could possibly need. So in 2024, I'm gonna give y'all a little pass. The rest of this year, just get your mind right that we're going to go into 2024 renewed with this idea that we can find people outside of ourselves to do everything. And so that's what I think it would be my one thought to leave. If you're looking around your organization and it doesn't look colorful yet, whatever that means, color, diversity, let's also touch on it. I'm gonna leave you with this too, because it's not just a black and white thing. Diversity is also ageism. Diversity, we can redefine what that looks like, or you can define it from your own organization or from your own personal value system, right? I think that whatever it is, that however you define it, you have to be prepared to defend it and display it. And if you can't do that, I think you got to go back to step one and keep working at it until you can determine and be determined that you want to really do this kind of work.
Thank you, Gina. Love that. Talk to us, Courtney. What can people do?
Yeah, I've been making a few notes just after hearing Beverly and Gina. And, I think for me, it is just also recognizing that when you look around your table of whoever is, if it's your employees or your board, and we've been saying this really since we started NME, of just recognizing that whoever you're representing, you can't always assume that you know what is best for them. And exactly oh, well, all of us are in this room, so we know exactly who to hire for, again, for hair and makeup or for, just speaking their language. So just look around your table and see, do you have diverse people at your table that actually can speak into all different elements, whether it is, gender, whether it is race or age or whatever it might be. You can't all just look alike, because again, what are you doing as far as moving the needle down, and to be able to really be able to have people to speak into those different experiences. You've got to be able to, have people again at that table that look different from you and have different perspectives. I think also, it always seems to be that most of the time the people of color are usually the first ones on the chopping block in terms of, their roles being cut. So I think that's also something to look at. Is that a bias thing? And then also, just don't think that just because you have a DEI person that you've done everything that you need to do for your company. Don't let that just be the role where you're yay, we do have Black people here. We do have people of color here, because there's a lot of us, who do different things. All of us on this, call do different parts of the industry. We're not just DEI people that speak into these different experiences and are, even trained in that, in that part of the industry as well. So those are just a few things I've been thinking of.
Thank you, Courtney. Alandis, what would you say we could do?
Yeah, I mean, along those same lines, like, just get to know different people in the room, right? Get to know different people, because you're always able to, you're going to be able to bring something to the table, that they don't have, and they're going to be able to bring something to the table that you don't have. Also wanted to get back to that question about, what advice to give to employees of color who are the only in their organization. Like, look for other people in other organizations who are like you. You do have a counterpart, right? There are people. I see people. We talk about, like, being the only African American attorney, or being the only African American executive at a certain level. There are other people, like, across the table, like across the board. You might have to actually, like, reach out to them. You know what I'm saying? But it might not be easy to contact, but it's important to make that contact. I think just so you know that you're not out there alone, and so you can get some pointers, and also kind of, like, figure out how they got advocates, and how they found support. I see a couple of attorneys in the chat, like, some I know, some I don't, would love to meet, but it's really about being intentional, about kind of lifting each other up in that point. And then when it comes to, just kind of, increasing diversity, really, it's about, I think, just like everybody else is saying, not being the only one, knowing who's around you, not being the only one, or not bringing people only who look like you, right? But, bring other people to the table as well, because, I mean, that's how we get better. That's how we sharpen ourselves.
Hey, Shannon,
Amazing.
we have a question. What advice
Okay.
would you give to employees of color who are the only in their organization? What are kinds of resources, mindsets, and support systems that can be fostered in that kind of working environment?
Yeah, Alandis just spoke to that a bit. Anybody want to speak to that? One thing I can say is that just authenticity. You're not there to blend in. That's the thing. It's not about that. It's about being and maintaining your individualism, your authenticity, you being there, and you being there, then that's one. You represent that voice. And so it's important that your voice remain authentic in those situations. That's what I would say. It would be something that's very important, to not lose yourself, in a situation like that.
I think Gina said something really powerful in the chat where she was saying it's not, only enough to be hired for these roles, but you have to be empowered by the people who are your leaders in these companies.
Yeah, I think people have done, I mean, first of all, I love that we can celebrate, some of our friends on here, and in other parts of the industry who are doing it right. There's a lot of things that are happening that are right that weren't going, that we didn't see 3 years ago. It hadn't evolved to this place that we are now, but there's a lot more to be done. And one of the things that I do continue to hear from younger executives is that they are also being invited to conversations, but no one's listening to them when they sit down at the table. So being empowered, it's not enough to be able to check the box and say, well, yeah, Courtney was there. But when you got her there in the room, no one was listening to her, nobody saw her, no one, paid any attention to her. So that is a still very real thing. And I think that, one of the things about this work, if we consider that there should not be a calendar for when we think it's going to be over, that we'll do ourselves all a favor, that it's going to be ongoing as it should be, because transformative work is, and it could take us, years and decades and generations to see what we want to see. I think the key to what we should be looking for is progress, and how we can all progress, this agenda forward with the power and the resources that we all personally that we have would help us get closer than we've ever been.
I love it.
It can't be performative
I
either.
love it.
I think
Yep.
that's a big thing too. Don't let it be performative that, okay, 3 years in, you were really big talking about these problems that were happening in 2020, and now it's like silence, or 2 years from now, it's going to kind of be like, okay, I think we've gotten back to normal. Like Gina was saying, it's still an ongoing, thing that has to continue to be nurtured and worked on.
Awesome. But thank you all. Thank you all for coming, and thank you all, everyone on this panel is super busy. So thank you all for participating. Thank you all for opening up. Thank you all for sharing your experiences and your knowledge and wisdom with not only with me, but with our audience. Thank you, Tom, for the invitation to me and to Nashville Music Equality for this conversation. June kicks off Black Music Month, kicks off Pride Month, but we just wanted to once again thank you for the opportunity to speak to this audience, and thank you for creating this platform where we might be able to get this message out. So we turn it back over to you, Tom.
I would say the same right back to all 5 of you. This has been incredible. I knew it was going to be. Shannon, you're a gifted speaker, and I love it when I hear you speak in public, especially on big stages. Gina, you're just one of the baddest ass people I know, and I'm so proud to call you a friend. Beverly, what else can I say? You're one of my heroes. And Alanis and Courtney, I am so, so proud to know you guys now too. And I'm excited about the work that you're doing. And I want to encourage all of you to carry on and encourage the audience to take these lessons to heart and carry on, especially what Gina said, +1 everywhere you go. With that, be nice to each other, and we'll see you out there soon. Have a great weekend, folks.